Hi kids, Goddess of Fire here, back with another episode of my Soul on Fire series, where we will be discussing all things spiritual from alignment to Zen. Hot topic today, the shadow self and shadow work. Now, I decided to go with this as a second episode since we started this series off with a bang and discussing things that are less than savory about the spiritual awakening, the spiritual path, and whatnot. So I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into shadow work, what it is, how we deal with it, how we move through it. Yeah. So here we go. If you see me looking down, it's because I have notes, and I just like to keep my thoughts organized so that I'm covering all the necessary points and being as thorough as I can. So what is the shadow self? In short, it's all your bad character traits. In long, it's the side of your personality that houses parts of yourself that you don't want to admit to having. It's the pieces of yourself that you find unacceptable, unlovable, and or unpleasant. We all have a shadow side. Doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, black, white, male, female, non-binary, whatever. Doesn't matter. Shadows, no bounds. Well, another thing that I have to bring to the forefront about the shadow self is that it is on a unconscious level. So it's not something that all of us are, attached to or connected to or even realize that it's even there. And I do want to make a point too that it is completely natural to, avoid, deny, ignore, and repress our shadows. And the reason why this is, a normalcy is because of societal norms. Society makes it seem like anything that is not deemed as happy or positive or, just good shouldn't be talked about. Shouldn't be. So the fact that we all have fucking issues shouldn't be talked about. The fact that we all have things that we don't like about ourselves shouldn't be talked about. And this, I think, is why a lot of us struggle with shadow work, is because for so long it has been ingrained and indoctrinated into us to fight anything that isn't amazing. But you want to know what? All parts of life are amazing. All parts of ourselves are amazing. They all serve a purpose. What I will say is a lot of our shadow self is created, in childhood. So those moments where we were discouraged from expressing our emotions, those moments when we may have not had needs met. Wow. We may not have had needs met. So realistically, our shadow self is just a hodgepodge of our unhealthy coping mechanisms. Realistically. Which can make it difficult to want to share those pieces. Nobody wants to talk about the bad parts of themselves. Nobody wants to talk about the bad parts of life. Nobody wants to talk about the bad parts of spiritual awakening, but that's where I come in. It's my calling. I want to go into some examples of what the shadow self is, how it is expressed. Shadow self is represented through abandonment issues. It's addictions or addictive tendencies, behaviors. It's aggression or anger issues. It's anxiety. It's codependency. You can find your shadow when you are comparing yourself to others, when you're engaging in gossip. Guilty. I do that. It's bad. I know. I shouldn't. Um, but hey, I know it's there. I know it exists within me. And I'm not ignoring her anymore. Another set of examples is fear. Living in fear. Fear is a shadow. Jealousy, envy, judgmental behaviors is another good one. Lack of confidence is definitely a shadow. Lack of confidence or lack of self-esteem, they're kind of one and the same. Passive aggressiveness, people pleasing or being a yes person. Self-sabotage, that's another one. And then weak or complete lack of boundaries. Because, that's bad spiritual hygiene. When people have access to you at any time and you're not telling people, hey, you've crossed a line, they're going to continue to cross it. But we're all learning. This is all a process. So you may be good at keeping your shadow at bay some days, and you might not be able to do it other days. It's just being aware of those points and parts of yourselves, being aware of your triggers, things like that, that can really put you back in the driver's seat, give you that sense of control back. Now let's just talk about what exactly is shadow work. Shadow work is learning how to integrate your shadow into your life in a positive way. Okay? So these so-called negative attributes about ourselves, we can turn that around. Anger issues is really just you being protective of yourself. Anger issues is really sadness in disguise, right? So it's about pinpointing where that kind of comes from. It's learning how to see that your shadow self is not the enemy. It's learning how to not see it as your inner villain, right? And it's learning to recognize it as the unhealed version of you. I'm going to say that again. It's learning to recognize it as the unhealed version of you. When we put it in those words, in so many words, it kind of changes the way you feel about it, doesn't it? And like I said, going back to the inner child is probably something that was founded in your childhood. It was founded in your formidable years. It was founded in times of crisis. A lot of times our shadow is just an unhealthy coping mechanism. I think I said that before, but I just kind of feel like I needed to reiterate that. And moving into how do you do shadow work? How do we confront this side of ourselves? How do we give it the attention that it needs? These unhealed pieces of ourselves. Well, I have come up with 3, I don't want to call them easy steps, but I came up with 3 steps to, I guess, kind of simplify the process, make it a little bit easier, make it seem like it's less daunting, overwhelming, and like it's something that we're all capable of doing, no matter what stage of life we're at. It's something that we constantly have to work at. So those 3 steps are acknowledge, accept, and understand. I'll say it again. Acknowledge, accept, and understand. Acknowledge your shadow aspects. Acknowledge that they exist. Acknowledge that they are real. Acknowledge that they are present. And how do we do that? Make a list. Make a pros and cons list about yourself. We make pros and cons lists about partners, about job scenarios, about moving, about major life events, but we don't do that in regards to major self-healing, major self-growth, right? Um, and if you have some trouble, like you really can't identify those shadows within yourself, then I encourage you, if you're into astrology at all, which if you're watching my channel, you probably are, look at your sun and your moon sign, okay? Because your sun is kind of like just your personality, right? How you show up. And then your moon is going to be how you process emotions. So me, for instance, I am a Sagittarius sun and a Sagittarius moon. Super easy for me. So why I'm bringing up your astrology sign is that might be a good way to start, because you look at anything that's about your astrological sign or whatever placement, it's going to give you, you know, a list of your good points, and it's also going to give you a list of your bad points, right? Like, for instance, me, I'm more of a peacemaker. I like to keep everybody happy. On the flip side, that definitely speaks to my people pleasing, right? So just think of or even just thinking of any good aspects of yourself, and what would be the polar opposite of that. So if you're kind, where are you mean? If you're happy, where are you sad? If you are helpful to others, maybe you self-sacrifice sometimes. Maybe you, again, are a people pleaser. So it's just kind of pinpointing those pieces and how they are represented in your life. Going on to step 2, accept your shadow. You got to accept your shadow because it is a part of you. It's not something that is meant to be conquered or destroyed. It can't. Because why? We can't have light without dark. Yin and yang wouldn't be a thing. Wow, I hate myself for just saying that. My guys think I'm funny. But yeah, it's not something we need to trump. It's not something we need to stomp out. It's something that we need to, again, accept, because it is the unhealed parts of ourselves. So approach this with a lot of grace, okay? Just approach it with a lot of grace when you come to that accepting stage, okay? And then step 3 is understanding your shadow self. And that's where you got to get your spiritual shovel and start digging. You got to start digging deep, finding out the root, finding out where the root is. Trace these cords that are connected to your soul back to a point, because it always starts somewhere. Like, for instance, if you have abandonment issues, that probably occurred in your childhood. Me, for instance, I suffer from abandonment issues. Why? Because my parents weren't there for me. My dad was not a part of my life. And when he was, it was very minimal. I met my father when I was 7 years old, and he was in and out for a couple of years, and then he was gone, just like he was when I was a kid, when I was born. You know, and my mom, she was not available either. She was a narcissistic, drug-addicted, alcoholic sex worker. So her life was more important than actually being a parent. So, you know, okay, so my basic needs were met. I had a house, I had clothes, I had food, but my emotions were highly neglected as a child. So it gave me almost this hyper independence. Like, I don't need anybody, because that's what I was taught when I was a child. And I was also taught that when you need people, when you love people, they leave you. They don't show up for you. So approaching each piece of your shadow as if it were a small child might help you gain some traction in healing it, because things that happen to us aren't our fault, but how we choose to move forward and what we do after that is our fault. I'm going to say it in a different way. So what happened to you when you were a child wasn't your fault, but how you're dealing with it, or should I say not dealing with it as an adult, is your fault. Okay? You know, I want us to all be successful. I want us to all be happy. But doing the same things and expecting the same results isn't going to give you that happy ending that you're seeking. You've got to dig deep. You got to feel it to heal it. You got to find where it hurts, address the wound, so that you can begin the healing process. That is, you know, what shadow work is all about. It's repairing damage that has been done to us, that we have developed into habits, right? So if we have anger issues, that probably started in childhood. If we have codependency issues, that probably started in childhood. If we have, you know, anxiety, that probably started in childhood. So how do we get rid of those things? Some of the things that I like to do is journal. Journaling is super duper, like, that's my shit right there. And the reason being is I'm a very visual person. So me being like, you know, things floating around in my head, I can't really put a face to it. I can't really identify it. I can't isolate it enough, right? So if I'm writing it down, that gives me a physical representation of my mental state. That gives me a physical representation of my feelings. And another thing is, you know, I can go back to that, make notes, reread. You know, you're basically researching yourself. That's really what it comes down to, is doing self-research and how you can better yourself. Another thing that I do, especially when it comes to like past relationships and things like that, we all have people that their voice still kind of rings in our head. They got negative shit to say. They've got criticisms. You know, and after a while, those voices actually turn into our own voice. So it's just changing that internal narrative, right? The way that I do that is I write letters. I write letters to people. And I say everything that I've always wanted to say, needed to say, couldn't say, wouldn't say, should have said. And ultimately it's up to you if you want to send the letter, because it's not about them, it's about you. Right? Getting it all off of your chest, releasing that negativity, right? If you want to send it, then for sure it's out there. That person knows. But realistically, when people are mean to us, unkind to us, criticize us, they probably have no idea that you were even hurt by it. To them, it was just a regular fucking Tuesday. To you, it was a, oh fuck, I'm a piece of shit moment. You know, it's something that may have been carried with us for a long time, something that you may not even know is still there. So now is the time to do the shadow work so that you can start unpacking that baggage, so that you can drop any burdens that no longer belong to you, so you can start catching those blessings. Because what happens when we do shadow work is we free ourselves up. We give ourselves that much more space. We give ourselves that much more room, because we're working through things. We're no longer, you know, giving so much energy to trying to, you know, hide that piece, that piece or those pieces of ourselves. We're no longer trying to bury them. We're bringing them to the light. Because you want to know what? We can't have day without night. We can't have the moon without the sun. So appreciate your light. Your light, that's wonderful. Yes, that's great. We all want that. But also give love. Give love to your darkness, because that's what it needs. Your darkness needs love. It needs care. It needs appreciation. It needs understanding. And that's why I came up with those 3 steps. Acknowledge, accept, and understand. So seek to understand yourselves. It's an important part of your process. If there is anything that I can personally do to assist you, don't hesitate to reach out. That information is down in the description box. Good luck. Okay? It's going to be hard. It might be a little ugly. It might be confusing. You're going to have to feel things you don't want to feel or haven't felt in a while. Or both. But it's important. Because you are important. All of you is important. Your light as well as your dark. I love you guys. Thank you for joining me for another episode. Until next time.